the network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
This is AVWeek, episode 65, recorded Friday, November 9th, 2012. Air gap.
Ready.
AVWeek.
Performing. Scan.
Week.
Online.
This is AVWeek. It's time for AV Week, your weekly wrap-up of audiovisual news and information. My name is Tim Albright. I'm your host. Thank you so very much for joining us. With us this week is George Tucker. He is the engineering coordinator for World Stage. How are you, sir?
Great to be here, guys.
And also from Commercial Integrator, the senior writer for Commercial Integrator, Mr. Craig MacCormack. How are you, sir?
Doing well. How about yourself?
Doing well. You guys got some snow this week, and I'm a little jealous because you're both on the East Coast. So
yeah, but it's all gone now. So
that's what Chris Craig was saying before we got on the air. He's like, hey, yeah, it was there, and now it's not. So that's yay.
I'm sure it'll be back again.
Well, yes, absolutely, because it's November, and good Lord, heaven help us, we can't have a winter without snow. Oh wait, we had one last year. Okay. This week we're going to talk about an open control architecture alliance, which I knew existed, but some interesting people have joined it. The CE Pro 100 Hurricane Sandy, because you guys are on the East Coast and we haven't gotten enough of that. And last but not least, we're going to start off though with the election. Yay! My biggest thing about the election is that the commercials are over.
Yay!
Yeah. Yeah, Craig, George and I agree a lot when it comes to politics, so I'm not going to get into the political side. But a couple of months ago, actually, one of your counterparts, Jason Knott, wrote a piece on CE Pro, and you guys at Commercial Integrator had some other kind of similar stories about who would be better for the economy and who would be better specifically for the AV industry. So, Craig, we'll start with you. Now that the election is over and President Obama has won another 4 years, do you think that it's going to have a big impact on the AV industry and in business in general? Or is it going to be kind of, I mean, are we looking at Clinton's last 4 years, or are we looking at, I don't know, Eisenhower's last 4 years?
Well, on commercialintegrator.com, we had kind of dueling stories, why Obama would be best and why Romney would be best, and I know that the most objection came to the Obama one. So I'm sure there are a lot of people in the industry who probably are not happy that there were people saying, they were going to have to start laying off people the day after the election. So I don't know if that's already happened. I hope not for the folks in the industry. I think it kind of remains to be seen. I thought it was interesting that Obama talked a lot about climate change in his acceptance speech, mm-hmm. and his victory speech on election night, and I think that could have some potential impacts for integrators in that space and green AV, that sort of thing. So I think it kind of remains to be seen, but I know that we did have a lot of objection to Obama being the choice, so I don't know how people feel about that now.
George, do you think that is because, I'm going to paint a very broad brush here, so I apologize if I offend anyone on this. Business people, by and large, are conservative in general in nature, and, well, let's be frank here, Mr. Obama is not, let's say, conservative in nature. Do you think that's why the biggest objection to Craig's the Commercial Integrator's articles was about the president maintaining his post?
I mean, I really do think that was all about business. It wasn't about technology. It wasn't about innovation. It was about bottom line concerns when it comes, I guess, to the healthcare, to taxes and such, which I have to frankly say is less of a concern, I think, for most people when you compare the two. I mean, not to take any real sides here, but the Republican Party in general tends to seem a little resistant to technology, as it were. And in all of my workings with politicos of various stripes, the Republicans seem to think, okay, there's technology, but they really want to see it from what's my bottom line and not what the innovation is, unless there's a bottom line, and then you ship it off somewhere to make it cheaper. And again, I don't want to get too aggressive on that, but that seems to be my take, is that everybody I've talked to is, let's look at it this way. How many people have we made fun of in the internet memes, in the political circles, especially the Congress, that were Republican or Democrat? I mean, we've got the guy that thought it was not a dump truck, it's tubes.
It's tubes, yes.
We've got a bunch of people who on the science committees didn't understand the basic parts of the technology itself and were just being fed lines. So I don't know. I mean, from the business side, I get it, but from a real true innovation and technical side, I have my concerns that the Romney campaign would have done anything different.
Yeah, but let's also take the other extreme. You know, there are those congressmen who do know about technology, and specifically Twitter, especially those in the New York area. I don't want to point any fingers or name any names.
Somebody whose unfortunate name just led to his. Well, yes.
If you don't know what we're talking about, type in Twitter and Congressman Wiener. Okay.
Yes.
Moving on quickly. A couple of things came down the pike this week, and this is kind of all hit and miss. First, we're going to go to Mr. Fred Wilson, who is not only a hero of mine, but also George's as well. Fred is a venture capitalist, a really smart guy. He was one of the first investors in Twitter.
And a Democrat, by the way.
And I didn't. Thank you for tying all that together. I don't care if he's a Democrat. I still like him. I don't care if he's a Republican. I still like him. Note what I did there. I'm not either. Figure that one out. Fred writes in his blog, and it's avc.com is his blog. He's talking about specifically Hurricane Sandy and the cloud. And Fred is in New York City. That's where he lives, and he and his family. And he started to talk about all of these great things in the cloud. And let's be frank here, he's a venture capitalist. I'm going to guess here and go out on a limb that most of his money is tied up in the cloud in any way, in some way, shape, or form. Whether that's, I don't know if he's personally invests in these, but stuff like Rhapsody and Pandora, and whether that's the Google Drive, the new version of Google Docs, or it's the Dropbox or what have you. He is heavily invested, both from a personal standpoint and also in his business, in the cloud. And he starts talking about how we deal with, quote unquote, the cloud, as lovely as it is, and disasters. Like, in other words, how do we get to this stuff? What are we doing with this stuff when disaster strikes, like Hurricane Sandy? George, you guys are in the middle. You and Craig both were in the middle of that. You were both on the East Coast. Talk a little bit about how the cloud was affected, and I don't mean to be simplistic here, by Sandy, with the obvious one being, well, we couldn't get to the internet. But how do we? I mean, does this put, I guess, a black mark on the cloud because of stuff like this?
I think it's a concern, definitely. There was, I think, I don't want to say I was surprised, but I was disappointed that there were moments where a lot of that stuff went down, Dropbox and the rest. And one would think that
Amazon.
Yeah, Amazon. I didn't notice the Amazon when I read about it, but Dropbox I actually noticed. Like, what happened to my files? And, somewhere in the back of my head, I knew they were there. I knew it would be fine. There's redundancies built in, but that paranoia of not being able to grab your media or whatever it is you have on there, it really was concerning. I was like, that's something they should have thought of. I mean, it almost felt to me like they had their main servers like on Mott Street and the rest were on Water Street. And like those two were like, right next to each other. They're in the same they're in the same city. You would think there would be one at least in, say, I don't know, St. Louis and New York.
Yay!
Two geographically disparate places that, in case some disaster happens, the rest of it's okay.
I like it being in St. Louis.
Yeah, there you go. Well, I was trying to throw some work at you. There you go.
Appreciate it. Yeah.
You guys got trunks there. You got big old telephone trunks.
We have one 256K modem in the middle of St. Louis, and that's it. Sorry.
Well, that would explain a good deal. Anyway.
Go ahead.
Yeah,
sorry.
no, I mean, seriously. I was like, again, I had that paranoia, I had that fear, that sort of clenchy, and we knew it was going to be okay, but needs to be some serious revisiting of their emergency scenarios.
And I know from talking to a lot of people, there's still a big concern about security in the cloud, and it's definitely less than it used to be, but it's still there, and you kind of wonder in a situation like this whether security of information is compromised. That you haven't heard anything about that yet, but that doesn't mean it didn't happen and won't be talked about at some point.
Well, not to play stupid here, but what are the security concerns people have?
Well, I think a lot of people wonder exactly where their information is going, and in a lot of cases, it's people that aren't totally familiar with kind of what the cloud does and what it doesn't do, and kind of how it all works. Sometimes when you explain to them, what it's all about, their concerns are less. But I think people don't always think about kind of the way they're sharing information. I've heard a lot of it happens a lot in the healthcare industry that doctors will pass along information that maybe they'd be passing. It'll end up in somebody's hands that it shouldn't be in, and that and the same in the banking industry. So it is a concern. It definitely, like I said, is less than it used to be.
So it's really more about people snooping and/or having access to files and then passing that along when they're not supposed to.
Well, and some of that's just people being, I almost said stupid, but people not thinking thoroughly exactly what they're doing.
Yep. And you wonder if any of that was compromised in a storm like this, where all these sites were down and I guess vulnerable.
Although if they're powered off, you can't do it. I mean, it's a high impedance air gap, right? I mean, you can't get inside them.
That's
wow. I've never heard that
protection.
phrase.
Nobody can get in, nobody can get out.
I love that. A high impedance air gap.
Air gap.
Okay.
For those who are listening who don't know what that is, it's usually an unplugged cable.
Yeah, just think about that for like 2 seconds, and then yeah. All right. Whew. This month on the cover of Commercial Integrator, in case you forgot, people still make magazines, and Craig works for one of them, so you should check it out. Commercial Integrator, and also on the website commercialintegrator.com, is a buddy of ours, a good friend of the show, and actually of all three of ours. Chris Netto, his company, the company that he works for, AV Help Desk, is on the cover. And the president, Steve Grace, was interviewed. You guys, Craig, did a story about just consultants in general, and your counterpart, Tom LeBlanc, wrote the story about this. First of all, talk to me a bit about how these guys are doing that, and also a little bit about how consultants are maybe morphing themselves in this industry.
I know a lot of people know a lot about specifiers. These are definitely more than that, and they talk about how they've never lost a client, which I think is definitely an interesting claim. And when Steve was pressed on it, he said that's definitely true. It's for sure. We have not lost a client, so they're obviously doing something right. I guess the best way to say it is they definitely know what they're doing, and they're certainly growing. And
one of the things, George, that Steve talks about in here, or that Steve Grace talks about in the article, is that they are taking the old AV consulting model and kind of throwing it out the window. And something that Chris Netto has talked about before on the show, where he not only he's not just a specifier like Craig mentioned, he's also in there and in the trenches. Is this something that, like, is AV Help Desk an anomaly, or is it something where consultants are going to have to be more than just, like Craig says, a specifier?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the world has changed with everything from being able to get anything you want on Amazon, whether you know how to use it or not, but you still can get it for the most part, right? I mean, there's very limited pieces of gear that are really held back by manufacturers to be dealer only. So you have to be that service person. You have to be the person who can explain it. You have to be the person who can provide support when an event happens or when they want an upgrade. You have to be more than just, all I do is put the drawings down. I mean, I think those days are really I can't imagine anyone who's in business who will survive more than a year or two more without changing to something along this kind of line. I mean, you can't.
Well, and I would agree with you. And the one thing, Steve did say, yeah, we haven't lost a client. That's huge because as a pseudo end user, I work for a community college here in St. Louis. Good Lord, I can't count on one hand. I don't think I can count on two hands the number of consultants that have gone through this place in the last 10 years. So saying that they haven't lost a client is really kind of saying something. This next story comes to us from GeekWire, which is a kind of a neat little website. It's something that George caught wind of, and it's a file patent. Let's talk about patents for a second because that's always exciting. But in all seriousness, this could be huge. Let's just put it that way. What it is a patent for a quote-unquote consumer detector that would disconnect content if you did not have a license for that many people. So think of it this way. I'll see if I can't simplify this. If you are on your Xbox, okay, and I have one, so let's go through this. You've got your Xbox. You're on the Microsoft Media Store. I don't even know what it's called. And you want to rent Thor, or you want to buy the latest Batman, and you do that. Somewhere in that agreement is a license for 5 people, let's say. Okay. Well, if you have a Kinect and it's hooked up, and you have 6 people in your living room, and it detects that, suddenly you don't have Thor. George, I don't like this any more than I like, the government telling me, what I can do in my house. But here's what I put, that we use Delicious for our feeds, and I put this on the Delicious feed. This is HDCP on steroids. Because not only is it saying, are you connected to the proper display, it's now saying, hey, you only paid $5 for that, and you can only have 3 people watching it. How big of a deal is this going to be if it goes through?
I think this is really bad. I can't imagine anyone accepting this. But then again, we talked about the cloud. I couldn't imagine not having the document creation application on my personal computer 5 years ago. I thought that was outrageous that I would let somebody be able to control that and then maybe hijack my content. I hate this in more ways. I think it's an outreach by Microsoft to try to dominate a marketplace and say, hey, guys, you want to come along with our box because we can protect you from this. And I don't know what the ratios are. And that's where my question comes in. Are we talking 5 friends, 10 friends, or is it really looking for something far more than that? I mean, are we looking at the bar? Are we looking at the, that kind of thing where there's people who are making money off of things that people that produce the content have always been upset about? And that's a whole other can of worms. Like if you're at a bar and you're doing the live Super Bowl and somebody doesn't want you doing that because you didn't pay the license, I mean, it changes the entire economic framework. Personally, but from a personal level, it is outrageous that you would do that. It's just outrageous because how can you not let people watch the content that they've purchased, regardless of how many people they have in their home?
Well, and does this open up a whole new little, not stream for them, but it gives them the opportunity to say, okay, you know what? Maybe on the little TV it says, how many people do you want to buy this for? Maybe that's the option there. The one thing I will take exception with you, though, you say that people won't stand for it. I didn't think people would stand for HDCP, and here we are, 5 years later, still having to deal with this thing, and it's the point now where I've said, okay, you know what, we're going to have to deal with this. This is something we're going to have to deal with as an industry because you know what, people have by and large dealt with, and I think what it may do is it may be something where the license is so big, maybe 10 or 15. Where the vast majority of consumers won't even notice it. And then the 1 or 2 people where it is an issue to, then they say, hey, by the way, you have too many people. You have to give us an extra $5 if you want this many people to watch it.
Well, and that's where my question of the threshold comes into. Yeah. I understand why they're saying it. I understand that they're saying like piracy, they're getting, some facility are making money without
piracy is a red herring.
Yeah. It may be a red herring, but there is some legitimacy to the statement, but it's the ratios that bother me. Why would you say it's 5? Could it be 10 or 15? Maybe, but where does it stop? And I'm buying a multi-user license for content, please. I mean, maybe 10 years from now I'll go, yeah, I do it too. But it's outrageous to me, and I'm being subdued about it. But man, does it burn me up.
It definitely seems like it's an extreme response to what obviously is some sort of problem on Microsoft's in Microsoft's opinion. But I kind of agree with what you guys are saying about it being a money grab. I don't really get what the point of it is other than that.
Well, and here's my point, guys. How about fixing the Kinect issue with identifying anyone who's not pure pale white?
Yeah.
First, and then we'll talk about this other stuff, huh? You've read those articles. It's like, oh yeah, it has a little difficulty doing the contrast.
So you're saying that the Kinect is racist?
I didn't say that.
Okay, I did. That's fine.
I don't think it was intentionally so.
Oh yes, you. Never mind. All right, let's go back to Sandy for a second because I missed this and I meant to mention it when we were talking about the original one. But Craig also wrote an article about Hurricane Sandy keeping integrators and consultants busy, and not just after the fact. Is that right, Craig? Where one of the things that actually we used an article from you guys last week about how ways that consultants and integrators can help people kind of get prepared for this. I mean, this is not something that happens every day, let's be honest here. But whether you're on the East Coast and you have hurricanes and you have snowstorms and you have, all this other jazz, or you're on the West Coast and you have earthquakes, they've been telling me since I was, like a little kid that California was going to fall into the ocean. So, I mean, how are integrators and consultants helping their end users? Whether it's residentials or commercial guys, how are they helping them prepare for stuff like this?
Well, I think obviously right now, they're stepping in to help them, get back on their feet and get their businesses and homes back up and running. But one of the interesting things that came out of this was the IT company I talked to, Atrion, mentioned that about a month or so from now, they'll have their sales staff, kind of talk to, some of the companies that had outages and problems and that sort of thing, and talk to them about what they can do to kind of prevent that the next time. They don't want to make it seem like they're seizing on an opportunity right now, so they'll give it some space, but later on down the road their sales staff will have conversations with their customers and talk about things that they can do to maybe prevent it next time around. So whether they have kind of a gap in their capabilities right now, or just have been resistant on buying a certain piece of technology, that they'll talk to them about the best way to do that. So,
well, that was going to be one of my questions, George. Was is how do you do that without sounding crass? I mean, obviously, like Craig said, you're not doing that right now. But is it in a week? Are you, George?
Yes.
You seriously?
What?
You were doing that right now?
No. I was saying yes to something else for you. No.
Oh, sorry.
First of all, right now I currently work for a staging and event production company. We don't do that kind of stuff. So that's completely out of our purview. No, what I was about to say though was that here's my biggest thing with that. Yeah, I'd say it's a month or so. Usually though, what'll happen, I think, is in the past experiences, the end client will actually bring it up. Let's get you recovered. Let's do this, and they'll usually say something. The husband will say, all right, so what do we do to make this not happen so badly next time? And then you go, oh, I'll have my guys get in touch with you about some options that may be of benefit. I think it's a far easier conversation than everybody's making it out to be at the moment, but it's necessary. Although one of the things I want to see these people have a conversation about, please, is stop putting the stuff in the basement. I know it's where we want to put it, but please, everybody that you read about is saying, yeah, well, the basement flooded up to the top and it was 6 feet of water. Yeah, okay, well, that's where water goes usually if you're on the seashore and if you're in flood zone. Can we not put stuff in the basement, please? That would help a little bit.
Yes, it would help a good percentage of the people, but there were those who had water up to the rooftop, so it wouldn't matter if you put it in the attic at that point.
Well, but it wouldn't even matter when we were talking about this. I mean, it wouldn't matter to anything we just talked about. Wouldn't matter to those people if it's up to the rooftop or if it got blown down. I mean, it's a start over, right? I mean,
yeah.
I mean, although
that's what we call a rebuild.
Way back when I worked for Crestron, we did receive a picture from somebody that they had just installed a system, and we got the picture, and it was the entire front of the house completely blown off.
Wow.
Somebody had done something with the gas line or the propane line, and when nobody was there, thankfully, it exploded. And it looked, I mean, the entire house looked like it just went up in flames. And they're shining, bright new, in their black, shiny racks was like restaurant gear, still there.
Oh, jeez.
It looked as though nothing had happened to it. I was like, oh, look at that.
Last,
but, I mean,
I was gonna say, well, last week we had Rich Fregosa on, who he lives on the West Coast, but he has buddies that do this do residential on the East Coast, and he had guys sending him pictures of just racks laying in the middle of the street.
Yeah.
Yeah. Being flooded.
Well, that whole Breezy Point and parts of Staten Island, it just, I mean, look, I grew up on the east end of Long Island, and while they actually had trouble, they didn't get quite as hit, but they're also a nautical community where a lot of those older houses and even the newer ones are built to withstand at least a Category 3 at most points. I know people will quibble with me on the code, but those houses stood pretty tall, and they're pretty high up. But that kind of stuff is expected. If you live on Dune Road out in the east end of Long Island, you expect that if it's going to be a hurricane, you might as well call it a wash.
Wow.
Yeah, because it just comes right up. I mean, the ocean, what was it, 11-foot surge or something at certain places? I mean, that's right up the dunes, right up the road, man. I mean,
jeez, wow.
Yeah.
And my worst. Well, I shouldn't say our worst thing. Our worst thing is flooding here. So
yeah,
we've had a couple monumental ones. The last big one was 93, 92, 93. So, all right, moving on. We're going to go to Andrew Robinson, an article that we got sent. George sent us, and just the article got me, George. I'll have to admit, because I'm a big coffee head. So the title of the article is "What Would Starbucks Do?" And other creative ideas for fixing the AV industries. He also talks a little bit about the film industry, but he makes a few good points in here about, there's a couple, he goes, let's just say that we're talking about speakers and you need to buy speakers. There's a couple different ways you can do it. One, you can get online and kind of do your own thing, or the other thing you can do is you can go into an AV store. Here in St. Louis we have a couple. One is the Sound Room, and you walk in and let's just say not skinny, older gentleman with a gray beard and probably a gray ponytail walks up and starts spouting off specs and names and digits and numbers, and you start, your eyes kind of glaze over. George, how as an AV industry, besides serving good coffee, can we take a page from Starbucks?
Well, this actually is something he wrote in reaction to an article he for Home Stereo magazine or something. Mm-hmm. I will post the link, I forget, yes. In which he went to the Rocky Mountain Audio Festival, in which it was a lot of this esoteric audiophile gear, right? And his problem with it was that, yes, this kind of stuff is necessary, but if that's all you're showing, you're blocking out an entire market segment that is necessary for your growth, right? If you're just showing $10,000 turntables and $1,500 headphones, you're going to put out an entire sort of, the Generation Y is not going to look at it.
No.
They're not there, and you're not going to entice them because you've given them nothing to step through to get to that point. Where are they going to go? Best Buy. They're going to step into a AV specialty store? They might, but what's been most people's experience when they step into one of these higher-end stores and they're not dressed in the latest very high fashion but relaxed looking wear is they get the sniffly nose. What's your budget? Oh, yes, well, there's a store down the street. So come on, it's true.
No, you're right. You're right. I'm chuckling because you're right.
And it's, hey, look, this has been my personal experience. I'm in the business, and I at one point was looking to redo my entire media room, and I had a decent budget back then to do it. I didn't have kids. We both had incomes. It was great, right? But they wouldn't even talk to me, even though I knew they sold stuff that would fit my budget, and we could have done it. So how do you entice these people? We have to change the perception that it's not going to be there unless you bring yourself to the marketplace. And he talked about the Starbucks model. I was thinking, and I think he mentions it in the article, the old days of going to a record store and being able to listen to the record. Mm-hmm. Well, why not, he said, have listening parties? Why not bring in a local band or somebody of name that you can possibly get? I mean, there's lots of them out there. It's actually not as expensive as people think. and you bring those people in, and you just have to understand what's your cost and what's the ratio of return that you want from it. If you get 1% return and these people start buying, yeah, it might be a 5-year plan, but you got to bring them in because they're not going to buy the stuff from you. They're still buying the Dr. Dre headsets from Monster, or he's now no longer with Monster, and they sound terrible, but people are buying them. Look at the Skull Candies. They at least sound a little bit better than the Dr. Dre's, but they're still pretty awful audiophile, or not even near audiophile listening. But they've got fashion, they've got style, they've got a marketing savvy that gets the kids in, and they do all kinds of events. They show up at events. All right, so you're a local dealer. You can't sponsor most likely your own, I don't know, X Games type competition with local kids, but maybe you can. But you can also turn your place into that. Look, bookstores became cafes, other stuff like that. You have to sort of branch out and make what you're offering almost incidental to them, but yet they get the chance to fiddle with it and a chance to go, oh, I can afford this, or I've just listened to it. Oh, man, do I crave that.
Well, and that's the other thing is keeping that in front of the kids. I mean, Craig, you guys have talked about before about how to connect with your customers.
I've done some stories, and I remember at least one integrator talked about how, before kind of signing a deal with a client, he would have them either stop by or he would bring them to one of the installations that they already did to kind of listen to the system and kind of get a feel for what it would do in their whatever restaurant or bar or office or whatever, and kind of understand kind of what they were getting into before they were getting into it. And I think a lot of it is just kind of paying attention to what the customer wants, rather than kind of walking in and saying, this is the kind of system you're going to get, that sort of thing. You have to kind of understand kind of what the solution is that they want and kind of build it from there. So
it's almost the difference between, the one coffee guy who makes one cup of coffee, one blend, and it's like, you want my cup of coffee? This is what I make. So take it or leave it. Versus, the venti, triple frap, non-fat, blah, blah, blah. You can specialize it however you want. So,
yeah. Well, in New York, there's a thing called book bars.
A
book bar.
Like
books, like, read.
And then you drink. So you drink and you read.
Yes, but what you do,
you drink alcohol and you read.
Yeah, you leave your book there. Okay. So you get off the train. You're going home, like you're going to take a bus. Yes. They have the little books there, your books in the back. Sort of, how they have the guys with the scotch. The scotch, is yours. It's on the shelf in the back, and you have the library of scotch where you can get yours. Well, this is the same thing with books, but hear me out on this, is that they also served food. They also had party space. But you came there every day. You had your book. The idea was that you came in, and if you had a book, you got discounts on the drinks that you bought. Okay. And you lingered. And you stayed, and you bought more, and you realized that this space was very comfortable. I should do something more. Let's go have dinner. So again, the natural draw was it's not something you would think naturally would be associative, but it really worked well. You got home, you read half a chapter or a chapter while having a pint, and you went home and had dinner or did whatever else you were going to do later. It really was this comforting middle ground decompression zone. Same thing with these kind of stores. Find it to make it a place where people want to come in on their way home or on their lunch hour to decompress, enjoy themselves, yet entertain or feed themselves. It's an odd mix, but you can actually get them, and then you start to build that clientele that wants to be there, and a larger percentage will buy. Not all. You're going to lose a few, but that really does work. You just have to think non-linear and long-tailish.
Okay. I have learned something today. I can go to New York and read and drink at the same time. All right,
and not just the beer bottle.
Well, I assumed as much. I would assume there would be some fancy, highbrow, liquors like some scotch and stuff. So
there are, and there's also beers and pints. But yeah, okay. It's a great little concept.
Wow, you learned something. There's a reason I stay in St. Louis, kids. All right, moving on to Engadget. Seagate is now a member of the DECE, which most of you are saying, what the heck is that? It's the Digital Entertainment Content Ecosystem. And George, what this means is that they support ultraviolet. Is this a yay, or is this a, okay, next story?
part of me wants to be excited and upset at the same time about it.
Why upset? Hang on, why upset?
It's so limiting, and again, it's further constricting the controls on how you can get your media, and there's you can't just put it anywhere, and your backups are an issue. And I mean, I haven't done a lot of research into ultraviolet, but a lot of the reviews I've read and the one or two people I know personally who's used it love it, but they go, well, I can only do this.
Yeah.
And it's sort of limiting, and it's sort of again, it's another step in the direction of, oh my gosh, you had 1984 on my Kindle and they took it away from me. How could they do that?
Because it was 1984 and it totally made sense to do that one.
Yeah, well, and there was 5 people in the room when they were reading it, so
yeah,
they took it away.
Jeez, wow.
I mean, think about that, actually. If you're starting to read from a book in the Kinect, are they going to go that far, too? See, this is where it gets really Big Brother and nefarious.
No, they're going to change the vocabulary on it.
Poetry out loud. There's 5 people there, Oh, we got to cut them off. They turn the lights off.
I'm starting to think George is a little paranoid.
He is. I'm getting him a tinfoil hat for Christmas. So
I read way too much dystopian literature.
Yeah, so do I, unfortunately. All right, Craig, is this? I don't know. Some is this a good thing, a bad thing? No big deal.
I don't think it's a big a deal. I don't think it's like the Kinect thing. I think this is probably not as big a security breach or any sort of invasion of privacy as that. So I'm not as worked up about this as George certainly seems to be.
Well, I'm taking it from the angle that it could be, but
yes, absolutely. I just see it as another thing for them. I mean, Seagate makes very good drives. They usually they had a couple years there where they weren't exactly hitting on all cylinders, but for the most part they make pretty good drives, and so I just kind of see this as they can this is one more step in their evolution. Let's talk about Sennheiser for a second. A good buddy of mine, a buddy of the show, Michael Drainer, just recently started there, so we're going to pick on them for a second. The story comes from digitaltrends.com. It is the Sennheiser IE800 in-ear earbuds. Mm-hmm. They're $1,000. Craig?
I will not be purchasing
Thank you.
Is there a reason? Someone will, and I'm sure they have some sort of market analysis that says that there's a demand for this and an interest in this, but it's certainly not for me.
Mr. Audiophile, Mr. Weighted Knobs, Mr. Tucker.
You got the weighted knobs parts right, but hey, look, part of the thing, like when we go back to about the high-end dealers, what kind of music do you listen to? Well, I listen to everything from jazz, okay, you get the nod, to lo-fi, anti-folk. Don't want to talk to you. But the thing about Sennheiser with these things is that they really want to show that they're always at the leading edge. I mean, the thing from Andrew Robertson was a lot of his rant about the Rocky Mountain Audio Festival was headphones are a big thing. Why aren't you offering reasonably priced audiophile, or at least approaching audiophile level stuff for the entry level? These aren't quite entry level, but Sennheiser has a history of saying, here's a loss leader, here's something that really attracts you. You're not going to buy this, but you know what? You're going to buy the next level down because it really has that cool factor, and you believe that if we build it this well, the stuff that we build down the line is going to be built and sound just as great as well.
I'm sorry,
or at least accept it.
Did you call this a loss leader?
Yeah.
At $1,000?
How many people are going to buy it for the cost of it?
Okay. All right.
There's a. Hey, look, I could be completely wrong, and Michael can come on and he can, smack me around about it. But I'm sure they sound great. Although, come on, they're earbuds. How great can they sound? They're earbuds. I mean, in-ear monitoring systems are pretty cool, but they're still not the best. I mean, you have to have an over-the-ear cans if you're going to be approaching anything audiophile, or if you really want something. I mean, I agree. $1,000 for something that I'm going to work out in? No. Yeah. But it's well thought out. I mean, it's got the air ports. It's got the little stuff on the back. It's got an actual driver in it. This was a 7-millimeter dynamic driver. That's awesome.
I'll beat them up and then I'll give them props. They're new headphones. You're talking about over-the-air cans.
Yeah.
They have these retro-looking ones. Sweet.
Which ones are those?
You're going to ask me for like a product number. I don't know. Hang on.
I'll look it up later.
Yeah, let me ping him and see if he's online. But
there you go.
Very nice.
Although they do come with something that I think every in-ear pod thing should come with, and it comes with a nice cleaning kit.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, that's one of the ones still that we don't talk about. Ooh, disgusting.
Yeah.
But you got to do it, people.
And not just with your fingers every once in a while with your fingernails. You've got to clean those
Yeah, well,
things up.
as I've said before, I have a 5 and 7-year-old. They have some in-ear monitors that they only use when I'm around, and I've locked the volume on their iPods so that or their little DSs so they can't go too loud.
Yeah.
But I'm constantly having to go in going, here's this cleaning tool, let's do this. And I'm like, hey, Dad, it sounds better. I'm like, yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for playing, kids. Dad knows a little bit what he's talking about.
Now clean those ears out.
Yeah. All right, next story from our buddies over at Rave Publication. Audinate joins Open Control Architecture Alliance. Yay.
Soon hype.
Thank you. The OCA. OCA. This is an alliance, and it's people like Bosch and Presonus and Yamaha. I'm going to ask an evil question. And considering the people I've had on the last 2 weeks, I may get angry phone calls. Here's my question. Where the freak is Extron and Crestron and AMX in this alliance? I mean, I've asked this before. It's an open control architecture alliance, right?
Yeah.
Where the freak are the control companies? I mean, Craig, let's start with you on this. Is there a reason besides the fact that they want to keep control over their protocols? And I get that. Believe me, they've spent a lot of money in research. But come on. I mean...
Oh, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think you got the reason right there, and you're right to call them out. But I'm not sure that'll spur them into action necessarily.
Yeah, me calling them out, I'm sure will send Randy Klein shaking in his boots. So
absolutely,
Mr. George.
Yeah.
Where are the three?
First of all, this is something that's a continuation from the Audio Engineering Society. I forget what the actual name is, but I know that it's like one of their AES-24- some development committee that was there in the early 2000s for doing this. I mean, where are they on the other audio bridging stuff? I haven't seen anything of that. Now, they may very well be there, but they're not putting their name behind it because they don't want the attention yet, because there's a there's a desire to say, okay, when we finally get it working and we have a product, we're the first out the door, and no one's going to beat us to it by having some simple chip that does a third of what we can say it can do, but still says they're the first out the door and get some sales from it, right?
Is this kind of like
true?
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, is that kind of like, HD based T being baked into Crestron's digital media and nobody really knowing it until the last, year or so?
One would say that's exactly what I'm doing. There might be some of that going on, and it's all behind the scenes. And look, they were also, people like Crestron and AMX were part of Plugfest, or I guess the Crestron, I don't think AMX was, which is this little development community of saying, hey, does your box work with my box? Let's see if we can all make it work together. And it's then a learning and communication committee of, we all do have the same specs. Oh, no, we didn't. Why didn't that work? All right, let's figure it out. They didn't announce that kind of stuff until years after they were doing it, because they were moving towards a certain product that they wanted to announce when it was fully blown. This is why they made such a big stink about HDMI, allowing HDMI certification on certain boxes that weren't full spec.
And to be more specific, what George is talking about is the HDMI consortium had a Plugfest where you physically brought your product, and you took an HDMI cable and you plugged it in to everybody else's stuff. And if it worked, cool. And if it didn't, you guys kind of, your engineers figured out, why it didn't work. So
right, a lot of finger pointing and blaming, and then, let's fix that. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so that might be very well it. Although it also could be, and I hate to say this, that there's no need.
I'm sorry, what?
Might be. There's no need
for what?
For this.
For the consortium?
Not on the scale or the in the product sense that these companies need. It still works fairly fine. I mean, I'm still trying to figure out really what I would do with this. I kind of get it, but it doesn't seem like something that's urgently needed. I don't know. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Okay, you're not wrong or right. I like standards, and I like consortiums like this because it makes my life as a pseudo end user / technology manager a lot easier when pin 2 is hot, let's say. Going back to RS-232, when we all can agree on that, well, then it makes my life easier when I go in to try to fix a room or install a room or what have you.
Sure.
It doesn't, and I understand there's R&D and you have to recapture stuff, and I get that. But as an end user and somebody who deals with the product, it does make my life a lot easier when we can all kind of agree on this stuff. So that's just
but I mean, look, CEC was supposed to be an agreed upon standard for some kind of open control within HDMI, and tell me how much it's done. I mean, come on, guys. We've talked about this before, that there's companies that don't apply the standards that they said they'd agreed to or insisted on. There's companies that say, oh, you have 2 DVD players. When you turn one on, we're going to automatically turn the other one off.
Yeah. And here's the other thing. There's no... I'm not looking for retribution or for punishment, but there's no recourse when they don't do what they say they're going to do. I mean, what are they going to do? Look mean at them across the table at their next meeting? I mean, what? Yeah, right. You didn't do what you said, so I'm going to give you the stink eye. Yeah. So.
Well, it seems penny wise, pound foolish that they're developing these standards, and yet maybe they're burning in backwards to let the consortiums and the companies work together, even though some of that means that another company's product line might not be relevant in another 5 years. I don't know if they're purposely avoiding this thing, but they keep pushing for open standards, and yet it always collapses on itself because no one will implement it the same way. And we said before, MIDI. MIDI's the perfect example of something that did it right, and why nobody's following it, I can't understand. MIDI has a certain set of functions you can do. You have all the features that you need, and then there's something called a sysx command, which is exclusive to that product or line of products that no one else can read, but you can still transmit it and pass it through, and it doesn't affect the other stuff. So you've got everything you need. You've got your open source, and you've got your proprietary stuff all in one, and it works.
Mm-hmm.
Why aren't we following this example in all these standards we're making? I don't get it.
No, here.
So if you're going to make it an open standard, make it open with that availability.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Last but not least, we're going to give a tip of the hat to probably the most genius. I'm going to make a little jest at one of Craig's compadres. Julie Jacobson wrote a piece. TVs may be the next big thing in home tech. I put this right next to the thing that cars might be the next big thing in transportation. I kid because I love Julie. In all seriousness, George, she talks more specifically about the fact that smart TVs and all of this Ultra HD, and in case you haven't gotten the memo, Ultra HD is now what we're calling 4K, which, if you can't grasp the exasperation in my voice, it's fully there. I wish that we would just stick with something. But is she right where when it comes to home and residential AV, this is going to be the centerpiece? It's not really the switcher anymore. It's not necessarily the other devices. This is going to be our new centerpiece.
I don't know if I agree with that. There was an article on TechCrunch, decrying, yay, the second screen becomes the primary. And for those who don't know the terminology, second screen is your iPads, your mobile devices.
Even your laptop can be a second screen.
It can be second. And what I've noticed with a lot of the guys that I talk to in this is that they're developing systems and their networks that they're building. Yes, there's a main screen, there's a 60-inch plasma or whatever it is in some main room, but less and less of that is happening, and more is the distributed network where people are watching the same thing on their second screens next to each other. Now, maybe this is a Gen Y thing, and maybe it's, but I've noticed it more and more that they're building these things into the networks of these installations, where it has to carry this media so that the main screen is really secondary. Will that develop into people using the second screen as one content, but the main screen's what they're really watching, but they want to watch the sidebar stuff? Here's some additional information about the show we're watching, or I don't know. Because remember the early days of HDTV when they were talking about off-air broadcast of these HDTVs, they had a smaller resolution because they wanted the side bandwidth to be used for internet, for alternate information, for coming up B-channel stuff. And that went away in favor of 1080p, but that was the original intent. So are we getting to that as well? I'm still unsure. But I really am doubtful that the main TV screen is the wave of the future in any sense, whether we're tongue-in-cheek or not. I do believe it's really here to stay.
Craig, would you like to how do you feel, seriously, in all seriousness, because I actually agree with Julie on this one, is the TV kind of the centerpiece or the new centerpiece or about to become the centerpiece again in our living rooms?
I think that it's definitely a possibility. And just to be clear, the TV got about 15% of the attendees at the CE Pro and Commercial Integrator summits.
Wow.
That's kind of where this poll was taken. So, and the next one after that was 4K and also people talked a lot about wireless. About 10% talked about wireless, and 4K is the next big thing. So there are other things. It doesn't sound like 3D got a lot of traction. But
Thank goodness.
Well, no, she also mentions that networking and Wi-Fi had some mention, but less than years prior, which I don't think means any less attention to it. It's just considered a given. It's ubiquitous. It's expected to be there. So we're really less interested in it because it's a platform or a medium that we know should be there. It's like the electrical light switch, you know.
But see, that's why I kind of see where she's coming from when it comes to the TV and the other people at CEDIA, where once again, the TV can be centric. The TV is exciting. I mean, like you mentioned, wireless and network. It's gotten to the point where that is ubiquitous, and the television was that way for a long time. And now, once again, it's the functionality that they're adding to it, and whether that's an Android operating system or something that's proprietary, like that's on the Sonys. These little gadgets and gadgets that they're putting on them, I think, is making them exciting and making them relevant again.
I don't know. I mean, again, I'm going to disagree because I know that I don't want it. I'm not going to use it. I'm going to use my iPad. If I want that stuff, I'm going to use my iPad. I'm not a gesture. I'm not going to be waving at the thing or using another tablet as a controller to access information on it. It's just too awkward. Even with, say, like the Control 4 on-screen stuff. I get why you do it. That's a little easier, but it's still a little more awkward. It just, I watch my own kids. I watch young kids. They're not going to do that. They're going to go to the device in their hand and watch that and/or use that as the main access.
You are a gesture.
It could be.
I'm going to make
you don't want to know which gesture it is, though.
No, I don't. All right. On that note, we're going to wrap this sucker up. With this week has been Mr. Craig MacCormack, the senior writer for Commercial Integrator magazine. Thank you so much for joining us, sir.
It's been a pleasure as always.
Let me know, or let people know how they can get in touch with you, how they can follow you, the Twitter, the Face, the stuff.
Yeah, I'm on Twitter. My handle is Craig MacCormack. It's MacCormack. And you can follow me there, and you can find our articles at commercialintegrator.com.
Yeah.
And we also publish a monthly magazine.
Yes, they paper and everything.
Hard to believe.
It is. Also with us has been George Tucker, the engineering coordinator for World Stage in New York. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. I love being on.
And let people know how they can follow you with the Twitter and the stuff.
The answer to that is yes.
Yes.
Tucker Tues on Twitter. I am Tucker Tuesday at typepad.com. I'm on AV Shout blog. I'm there. You just find me. I'll be there.
Just Google George Tucker and go to the second
Tucker
page.
Tues. Yeah. Tucker Tues. Second page. Yeah, maybe the second page. Could be third.
First page is nothing but just bad stuff, so don't worry about it. My name is Tim Albright. If you'd like to follow me, it is TD, Tim David Albright, ALBRIGHT. But more importantly for me and everybody here at AVNation, please go by the website, avnation.tv. avnation.tv. That's where you'll find all this podcast and others as well. You can also find us on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on Twitter, and on Google Plus and wherever else wherever else you can find social media stuff. So yeah, check us out. avnation.tv. avnation.tv. That's all the time we have for AV Week.